Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namane. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gaudavani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shanyavadi Pashtya Deshatarane Trinadapi Sunichena Tarar Iva Sahishnuna Manina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Kevalam, Kalau Nastyeva, Nastyeva, Nastyeva Gatiranyata. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasa Adigor Bhakta Vrinda. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasa Adigor Bhakta Vrinda. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasa Adigor Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha, Gopala Govinda Rama Srimad-Bhagavatam. Hare Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha, Gopala Govinda Rama Srimad-Bhagavatam. Hare Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha, Gopala Govinda Rama Srimad-Bhagavatam. Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana Hari, Govinda Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana Hari, Govinda Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana Hari, Govinda Jaya Jaya, Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana Hari, Govinda Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana Hari, Govinda Jaya Jaya. Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya. Krishna 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 Hey. Krishna 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 Hey. Krishna 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 Rakshama. Krishna 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 Pahimam. Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rakshama. Krishna Keshava Krishna Keshava Krishna Keshava Pahimam. Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rakshama. Krishna Keshava Krishna Keshava Krishna Keshava Pahimam. Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rakshama. Krishna Keshava Krishna Keshava Krishna Keshava Pahimam. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Paribrajacharya Astotra Satta Sri Srimad. His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Syama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrndavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Jamuna Devi Ki Jai. Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande Cologne Krishna Book Club Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So last week, we started out by reading how Nanda Maharaj, Yashoda, and all the residents of Vrndavan finally decided to leave Mathura and go back to Vrndavan. Then Krishna was initiated into the Gayatri Mantra by his guru, I forget his name, Gargamuni. And then Krishna was sent to the Gurukula in Avantipur, Ujjain, and studied under Sandipani Muni. And Krishna and Balarama learned everything perfectly in 64 days. And by each night, they had mastered what they had learned. And then as Guru Dakshina, Sandipani Muni requested something extraordinary because he could understand that these two students, Krishna and Balarama, were not ordinary students. In fact, he could understand that they were the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself. And so it was requested of Krishna to try to find out their son who had drowned in the ocean. And Krishna first went to the ocean, but after killing the Panchajana demon, he could not find the boy's body, and so Krishna took the demon whose body was in the form of a conch shell, and that became Krishna's transcendental conch shell, Panchajanya. Then Krishna went to Yamaraj and retrieved the dead son of his teacher and brought the boy back to Sandipani Muni and his wife. And Sandipani Muni was so pleased that he blessed Krishna and Balaram that whatever they would speak, no matter what it is, whatever they would speak, would remain eternally fresh as the Vedas themselves. And thus Prabhupada made the comment, this is why Bhagavad Gita is still studied today, 5,000 years later, because of that blessing of Sandipani Muni. So today's first episode, as I told you last week, we are returning to Vrndavan. So this first episode is called Krishna's Bhava Expansion. Nanda Maharaj returned to Vrndavan without Krishna and Balaram. He was accompanied only by the cowherder boys and men. And it was certainly a very pathetic scene for the gopis, Mother Yashoda, Srimati Radharani, and all the residents of Vrndavan. Now, since then, many devotees have tried to make adjustments to Krishna's being away from Vrndavan because, according to expert Vaishnava opinion, Krishna, the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, never goes even a step out of Vrndavan. Krishna always remains there. And so the explanation of expert Vaishnava devotees is that Krishna was actually not absent from Vrndavan. When Krishna was starting for Mathura on the chariot driven by Akrura, and the gopis were blocking the way, Krishna assured them that he was coming back just after finishing his business in Mathura. Krishna also told them not to be overwhelmed, and so in this way, Krishna pacified the residents of Vrndavan. But when Krishna failed to come back with Nanda Maharaj, it appeared that either Krishna cheated them or could not keep his promise. However, expert devotees have decided that Krishna was neither a cheater nor a breaker of promises. For Krishna, in his original identity, returned with Nanda Maharaj and stayed with the gopis and Mother Yashoda in his Bhava expansion. Krishna and Balaram remained in Mathura, not in their original forms, but in their expansions as Vasudeva and Sankarshan. The real Krishna and Balaram were in Vrndavan in their Bhava manifestation, whereas in Mathura, they appeared in the Prabhava and Vaibhava expansions. This is the expert opinion of advanced Vaishnava devotees of Krishna. However, externally they were absent from Vrndavan. Therefore, when Nanda Maharaj was preparing to return to Vrndavan from Mathura, there was some discussion between him and the cowherder boys concerning how they could possibly live in separation from Krishna. And the conclusion to separate was reached by mutual agreement. Vasudeva and Devaki, who happened to be the real quote-unquote parents of Krishna and Balaram, wanted to keep them now because of the death of Kamsa. Because while Kamsa was alive, Krishna and Balaram were kept under the protection of Nanda Maharaj in Vrndavan. And so now, naturally, the father and mother of Krishna and Balaram, namely Vasudeva and Devaki, wanted them to remain specifically for the reformatory function of purification, the sacred thread ceremony. They also wanted to give them a proper education, for this is the duty of the father. And yet another consideration was that all the friends of Kamsa outside of Mathura were now planning to attack Mathura. And so for that reason also, Krishna's presence was required in Mathura. Krishna did not want Vrndavan disturbed by enemies like Dantavakra and Jarasandha. So if Krishna were to go to Vrndavan, then these enemies would not only attack Mathura, but would also go on to Vrndavan, and the peaceful inhabitants of Vrndavan would be disturbed. Krishna therefore decided to remain in Mathura, and Nanda Maharaj went back to Vrndavan. Although the inhabitants of Vrndavan felt separation from Krishna, the resulting ecstasy, known as bhava, caused them to perceive that Krishna was always present with them by his lila or pastime. So this is the key. This is the meaning of bhava expansion. In other words, externally it appeared that Krishna and Balaram were not present in Vrndavan. Thus, the residents of Vrndavan were feeling separation. But the residents of Vrndavan could only remember over and over and over again all the pastimes that they had enjoyed with Krishna during his first 11 or 15 years. So that remembrance of Krishna is non-different from Krishna himself. That is what Prabhupada means by bhava expansion. In other words, because we're on the absolute platform, remembering Krishna is as good as Krishna actually being in your presence. This is the absolute nature of spiritual life. And this is known as the bhava expansion. The residents of Vrndavan had so much love and affection for Krishna that even though he was not quote-unquote physically present, they simply remembered him day and night and day. And that remembrance of Krishna is as good as Krishna being there. Since Krishna had departed from Vrndavan and gone to Mathura, the inhabitants of Vrndavan, especially Mother Yashoda, Nanda Maharaj, Srimati Radharani, the gopis, and the cowherder boys, were simply thinking of Krishna at every step. They were thinking, oh, here Krishna was playing in this way. Oh, here Krishna was blowing his flute. Oh, Krishna was joking with us in this way. And Krishna was embracing us like this. So this is called Lila Smarana. And it is the process of association with Krishna most recommended by great devotees. Why, even Lord Chaitanya, when he was at Jagannath Puri, enjoyed Lila Smarana association with Krishna. Those in the most exalted position of devotional service and ecstasy can live with Krishna always by remembering Krishna's pastimes. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, a great acharya in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya after Lord Chaitanya, has given us a transcendental literary work entitled Krishna Bhavanamrita, which is full with Krishna's pastimes. And so, exalted devotees can remain absorbed in Krishna thought by reading such books. And anyway, any book of Krishna Lila, even this Krishna book, or our teachings of Lord Chaitanya, is actually solace for devotees feeling separation from Krishna. So, this is why previously I mentioned that when we finish Krishna book, the next book we will do is that teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So here you see why I am selecting that as the next book for our weekly class. That Krishna and Balaram did not return to Vrndavan can thus be adjusted as follows. They did not break their promise to return to Vrndavan, nor were they absent, but their presence was necessary in Mathura. Krishna had promised the residents of Vrndavan, "I shall return." And also in the previous chapter, Lord Krishna promised Nanda Maharaj, "We will come back to see you and Mother Yashoda." At the same time, Krishna could not break his promise to Sri Vasudeva and Mother Devaki to finally spend some time with them after they had suffered for so many years. Therefore, Krishna decided to send his intimate representative, Udava, to Vrndavan in his place. So the question may be asked, why did Krishna not invite Nanda and Yashoda to visit him in Mathura? For Krishna to have exchanged loving feelings with Nanda and Yashoda in the same place, and at the same time that Krishna was exchanging them with Vasudeva and Devaki, would have only created an awkward situation in Krishna's pastimes. That is why Krishna did not invite Nanda and Yashoda to stay with him in Mathura. The residents of Vrndavan had their own way of understanding Krishna, and their feelings could not have been appropriately expressed on a regular basis in the kingly atmosphere of Mathura. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This episode is entitled, Krishna Sends Udava to Vrndavan. In the meantime, Udava, a cousin brother of Krishna, came to see Krishna from Dwaraka. Udava was one of Vasudeva's brothers, Devabhaga, and was almost the same age as Krishna. Udava's bodily features resembled Krishna's almost exactly. After Krishna returned from his teacher's home, Krishna was pleased to see Udava, who happened to be his dearmost friend. Krishna wanted to send Udava to Vrndavan with a message to the residents to pacify their deep feelings of separation. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Ye yatha mang prapadyante tangs tataiva bhajamyaham. Krishna is very responsive. Krishna responds in proportion to the devotee's advancement in devotional service. Thus, as the gopis were thinking of Krishna in separation 24 hours a day, so Krishna was also always thinking of the gopis, Mother Yashoda, Nanda Maharaj, and all the other residents of Vrndavan. Although Krishna appeared to be away from them, Krishna could understand how they were transcendentally aggrieved. And so Krishna immediately wanted to send Udava to give them a message of solace. Udava is described as the most exalted personality in the Vrishni dynasty, being almost equal to Krishna. Udava was a great friend of Krishna, and being the direct student of Brihaspati, the teacher and priest of the heavenly planets, Udava was very intelligent and sharp in decision. Intellectually, Udava was highly qualified. Krishna, being a very loving friend of Udava, wanted to send him to Vrndavan just so that he could study the highly elevated ecstatic devotional service practiced by the residents of Vrndavan. This means even if one is highly elevated in material education, and even if one is the disciple of Brihaspati, still one has to learn from the gopis and the other residents of Vrndavan how to love Krishna to the highest degree. And so, it was Krishna's special favor to Udava by sending him to Vrndavan with a message for the residents there, which was meant to pacify them. After all, Lord Krishna is also named Hari, which means one who takes away all distress from surrendered souls. Lord Chaitanya instructs that there cannot be at any time a worship as exalted as the worship realized by the gopis. Being very anxious about the gopis' grief, Krishna talked with Udava, politely requesting him to go to Vrndavan. Shaking Udava's hands with his own hands, Krishna then said, "My dear gentle friend Udava, please go immediately to Vrndavan and try to pacify my father and mother, Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Devi, and also the gopis. All of them are grief-stricken, as if suffering from great ailments. Go and give them a message from me, for I hope their ailments will be partially relieved. The gopis are always absorbed in thoughts of me. The gopis have dedicated body, desire, life and soul to me. And I am anxious not only for the gopis, but for anyone who sacrifices society, friendship, love, and personal comforts for me. It is my duty to protect such exalted devotees. And the gopis are the most dear. They always think of me in such a way that they remained overwhelmed and almost dead in anxiety due to separation from me. And they are keeping alive simply by thinking that I am returning to them very soon." Requested by Lord Krishna, Udava immediately left on his chariot and carried the message to Gokula. Udava approached Vrndavan at sunset, when the cows were returning home from the pasturing ground. Udava and his chariot were covered by the dust raised by the hoofs of the cows. Udava saw Udava saw bulls running after the cows for mating. Other cows with overladen milk bags were running after their calves in order to feed them with milk. Udava saw that the entire land of Vrndavan was filled with white cows and their calves running here and there all over Gokula, and Udava could hear the sound of milking. Every residential house in Vrndavan was decorated for the worship of the sun god and the fire god, and for the reception of guests, the reception of cows, brahmanas, and demigods. Every house was sanctified by lights and incense. All over Vrndavan there were nice gardens filled with flowers, and the sounds of humming bees and singing birds. The lakes were filled with lotus flowers and with ducks and swans. Udava entered the house of Nanda Maharaj and was received as a representative of Vasudeva Krishna. Nanda Maharaj offered Udava a sitting place and sat down with him to ask some questions about messages from Krishna and Balarama and other family members in Mathura. Nanda could understand that Udava was indeed a very confidential friend of Krishna, and therefore must have come with good messages. Since Sri Krishna maintains ordinary devotees who are engaged in sadhana bhakti, or devotional service in practice, certainly Krishna maintains the gopis who are his most exalted devotees. Whatever is dear to us becomes an object of our possessiveness. Ultimately, the most dear object is our very soul, our very own self. Thus, things in a favorable relationship to ourself also become dear to us, and we try to possess them. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, among countless millions of such dear things, Sri Krishna is the most dear of all, even dearer than one's own self. The gopis had actually realized this fact, and they were stunned in separation from Krishna because of their intense love for Krishna. Although they would have given up their lives, they were kept alive only by Krishna's transcendental potency. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, although the gopis of Vrndavan were apparently married, their husbands actually had no contacts whatsoever with their supremely attractive qualities of form, taste, fragrance, sound, touch, and so on. Rather, these husbands merely presumed that these are our wives. In other words, by Lord Krishna's spiritual potencies, the gopis existed entirely for Krishna's pleasure, and Krishna loved them in the mood of a paramour lover. In fact, the gopis are manifestations of Krishna's internal nature, Krishna's supreme pleasure potency, Hladani. And on that spiritual platform, they attracted Krishna by their pure love. Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda, Lord Krishna's parents in Vrndavan, had also attained a most exalted state of love for Krishna, and they too could barely maintain their lives in Krishna's absence. Thus, by Udava going to Vrndavan, he would also give special attention to Nanda and Yashoda. And although Gokula was merged in grief because of separation from Lord Krishna, the Lord expanded his internal potency to cover that particular manifestation of Vraja and allow Udava to see the normal bustle and joy of Raja at sunset. Udava indeed looked just like Nanda's son Krishna, and thus gave pleasure to anyone who saw Udava. Thus, although Nanda was absorbed in thoughts of separation from Krishna, when Nanda saw Udava coming toward his house, Nanda then became aware of external events and eagerly went out to embrace his exalted visitor. It's time for a commercial break before we do the final episode for today. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jasodanandana Gopi Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jasodanandana Gopi Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Gopi Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Having trouble here. Hold on. Okay. This is entitled Udava Meets Nanda and Yashoda. Nanda then spoke. Oh, my dear Udava, how is my friend Vasudeva enjoying life? Now he is released from the prison of Kamsa, and now he's with his friends and children, Krishna and Balarama. So Vasudeva must be very happy now. Tell me about Vasudeva and his welfare. We are also very happy that Kamsa, that most sinful demon, has been killed. Kamsa was always envious of the family of the Yadus, his own relatives. And now, because of his sinful activities, Kamsa is dead and gone, along with all of his brothers. So please, let us know whether Krishna remembers now his father and mother and his friends and companions back here in Vrndavan. Does Krishna like to remember his cows, his gopis, his Govardhan hill, his pasturing grounds in Vrndavan? Or has Krishna now forgotten all of these? And is there any possibility of Krishna ever coming back to his friends and relatives so that we can again see Krishna's beautiful face with its raised nose and lotus-like eyes? We remember how Krishna saved us from the forest fire, how Krishna saved us from the great snake Kaliya in the Yamuna, and how Krishna saved us from so many other demons. And we simply think of how much we are obliged to Krishna for giving us protection in so many dangerous situations. My dear Udava, when we think of Krishna's beautiful face and eyes, and we remember Krishna's different activities here in Vrndavan, we become so overwhelmed that all of our activities cease. We simply think of Krishna, how Krishna used to smile, and how Krishna looked upon us with grace. When we go to the bank of the Yamuna, or the lakes of Vrndavan, or near Govardhan Hill, or the pasturing field, we see the impressions of Krishna's footprints are still on the surface of the earth. We remember Krishna playing in those places because Krishna was constantly visiting them. When Krishna's appearance within our minds become manifest, we immediately become absorbed in thought of Krishna. We therefore think that perhaps Krishna and Balarama may be chief demigods in heaven who have appeared before us like ordinary boys to execute particular duties here on earth. After all, this was foretold by Garga Muni when making Krishna's horoscope. And if Krishna were not a great personality, how could Krishna have killed Kamsa, who possessed the strength of 10,000 elephants? Besides Kamsa, there were the very strong wrestlers, as well as the gigantic elephant Kuvalayapida. Krishna killed all these animals and demons just as a lion kills an ordinary animal. And how wonderful it is that Krishna took in one hand the big, heavy bow made of 3 joined palm trees and broke it very quickly. How wonderful it is that for 7 days continuously, Krishna held up Govardhan Hill with one hand with his little pinky. How wonderful it is that Krishna has killed all the demons along with Balarama, like Pralamba, Denuka, Arista, Trinavarta, and Bakaasura. These demons were so strong that even the demigods in the heavenly planets were afraid of them. But Krishna killed them as easily as anything. While thus describing the uncommon activities of Krishna before Udava, Nanda Maharaj gradually became overwhelmed and could no longer speak. And as for Mother Yashoda, she simply sat by the side of her husband, hearing the pastimes of Krishna without speaking even one word. Instead, Yashoda simply cried incessantly, and milk poured from her breasts. When Udava saw Maharaj Nanda and Yashoda so extraordinarily overwhelmed with thoughts of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and when Udava experienced their extraordinary affection for Krishna, Udava also became overwhelmed and spoke as follows. O my dear mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj, indeed, you are most respectable among human beings because no one but you can meditate in such transcendental ecstasy. Balarama and Krishna are the original personalities of Godhead from whom the cosmic manifestation emanates. Krishna and Balarama are chief among all personalities, and each of them is both the material and efficient cause of this material creation. Material nature is conducted by the Purusha incarnations, Mahavishnu, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, and Shirodakashayi Vishnu. But they simply act under the order of Krishna and Balarama. By their partial representation, they enter the hearts of all living entities as Paramatma. Krishna and Balarama are the source of all knowledge and forgetfulness also. This is confirmed in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Sarvasya chahang riddhisanni vishto matak smritir jnanam apohanang cha vedaischa sarvair aham meva vedyo vedanta krid vedavid eva chaham. Krishna says in the Gita, I am present in everyone's heart, and I cause everyone to remember and forget. I am the original compiler of the Vedanta in my form as Vyasadeva, and I am the actual knower of the Vedas. Udava continued to praise Nanda and Yashoda. If at the time of death a person can fix one's pure mind upon Krishna, even for a moment, one becomes eligible to give up his or her material body and appear in one's original spiritual body, just as the sun rises with all illumination. Passing from one's life in this way, one immediately enters into the spiritual kingdom, Vaikuntha, which is without any anxiety. So this is the result of Krishna conscious practice. If we practice Krishna consciousness in this present body, while in a healthy condition and good mind, simply by chanting the holy Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, we will have every possibility of fixing the mind upon Krishna at the time of death. If we do this, then our lives become successful without any doubt. But if we keep our minds always absorbed in fruitive activities for material enjoyment, then naturally at the time of death, we will think of such activities and again be forced to enter material conditioned bodies only to suffer the threefold miseries of material existence. Therefore, to remain always absorbed in Krishna consciousness was the standard of the inhabitants of Vrndavan as exhibited by Maharaj Nanda, Yashoda, and the gopis. If we can but simply follow in their footsteps, even to a minute proportion, oh, our lives will surely become successful, and certainly we shall enter the spiritual kingdom, Vaikuntha. Udava continued, My dear Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj, you have thus fixed your minds wholly and solely upon that Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, whose transcendental form is the cause of impersonal Brahma. The Brahman effulgence is only the bodily rays of Narayana. And because you are always absorbed in ecstatic thought of Krishna and Balarama, what pious activity remains for you to perform? I have brought a message from Krishna that he will indeed very soon come back to Vrndavan and satisfy you by his personal presence. Krishna promised that he would come back to Vrndavan after finishing his business in Mathura. This promise Krishna will surely fulfill. I therefore request that the two of you, who are the best among all who are fortunate, you should not be aggrieved on account of Krishna's absence. You are already perceiving Krishna's presence 24 hours a day. Yet, Krishna will come and see you very soon. Actually, Krishna is present everywhere and in everyone's heart, just as fire is present in wood. Since Krishna is the Supersoul, no one is actually Krishna's enemy, and no one is Krishna's friend. No one is equal to Krishna, and neither no one is lower or higher than Krishna. I must tell you, Krishna actually has no father, mother, brother, relative. Nor does Krishna require society, friendship, and love. Because Krishna does not have a material body like us. Krishna never appears or takes birth as an ordinary human being. Krishna does not appear in higher or lower species of life like ordinary conditioned souls who are forced to take birth on account of their previous fruitive activities. No, Krishna appears by his internal potency just to give protection to his devotees. Krishna is never influenced by the modes of material nature. But when Krishna appears within this material world, Krishna seems to act like an ordinary living entity under the spell of the modes of nature. Whereas in fact, Krishna is the overseer of this material creation, and while remaining unaffected by the material modes of nature, Krishna creates, maintains, and dissolves the whole cosmic manifestation. We wrongly look upon Krishna and Balarama as ordinary human beings, just as whirling men see the whole world whirling around them. The personality of Godhead is no one's son. Krishna is actually everyone's father, mother, and supreme controller. There is no doubt about this. Whatever is already being experienced, whatever is not being experienced, whatever is already in existence, not in existence, or existing in the future, whatever is the smallest and whatever is the biggest, has no existence outside of Krishna the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everything rests in Krishna, but Krishna is untouched by everything manifested. Here are some notes from the Srimad-Bhagavatam on this section. Now that Krishna has become a prince in the great city of Mathura, Nanda had lost all hope that Krishna would ever come back to live in the simple cowherder village of Vrndavan. But still, Nanda hoped against hope that Krishna would come back at least once to visit the simple cowherder folk who had raised Krishna from birth. The great bow that Krishna broke was actually 270 feet long. And from the very day that Krishna had left for Mathura, Mother Yashoda, though counseled and consoled by hundreds of men and women, could see nothing but the face of her son. Yashoda kept her eyes closed to everyone else and cried constantly. Thus, Yashoda could not recognize Udava, could not treat him with parental affection. Yashoda could not ask him any questions or give Udava any message for her Krishna, because Yashoda was simply overwhelmed with love for Krishna. Understanding Nanda's mood, that Krishna and Balarama must be two exalted demigods, Udava here referred to Krishna as Lord Narayan. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namaste Narasimhaya, Prahlad Aklad Dayane, Hiranyakashi Puravakshaha, Shilat Kankana Kalaye, Ito Nrsinga Parato Nrsingo, Yato Yami Tato Nrsinga, Bahi Nrsingo Kridaye Nrsingo, Nrsingham Adim Sharanam Prapadye, Nrsingham Adim Sharanam Prapadye, Tavakara Kamala Varei Nakam Adbhuta Sringam, Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringam, Keshavadvrita Narahadi Rupa, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Keshavadvrita Narahadi Rupa, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare. Om Tha